We are joined with the man himself. I deeply appreciate him joining me, Laith Marouf. Laith Marouf is an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonialization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples and building broadcast capability for misrepresented and underrepresented communities around the world. Laith, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me again, Jamal.
No, man, always appreciate it. You put out a post, and I was fascinated by that post, and I want to get to that. But first, I have to get to two things: the attacks on Yemen and what is taking place in Syria right now in regards to what seems to be ethnic cleansing. From my understanding, um, Jolani's goons, his dogs, are going from house to house, killing minority communities with the idea of taking over property in those communities, especially in the coastal regions where there was the uprising. What is going on the ground?
Yeah, according to the Syrian Observatory of Human Rights, which is an imperialist organization that was covering Syria for the last 15 years, talking about the crimes of Assad government. So this is you know, a, a source of information that is not pro-resistance. And they are claiming that 10,000 Syrians were slaughtered over the last 3 weeks in the coast of Syria. So this is the imperialist, numbers. According to the numbers that we are getting, it's over 15,000 killed right now. So this is a higher death rate than even what happened in Gaza during the genocide. So remember, it's like almost 50,000 Palestinians in Gaza in 15 months. So clearly the numbers are wild in terms of the genocide in Syria. Right now maybe 100,000 have been displaced, much of them crossing into Lebanon. I was in the north of Lebanon over the last 2 days, documenting the arrival of Syrian refugees into the border villages in the north. Uh, there's Alawis, Christians, Shia, and even Sunni people crossing and running away. Because, by the way, this genocide is not only focusing on the minorities, Alawis, Shia, Druze, and Christian, which are receiving the bulk of the massacres and the crimes, but also this genocide is targeting the leadership of the Sunni sect in Syria. A reminder for our viewers, the majority of Muslim Sunnis in Syria belong to the Sufi mystic sect, close to 90% of them. There is no religious support to the Wahhabi cult or the Ikhwani Muslim Brotherhood movement. And therefore, we saw two very famous preachers in Syria that made messages critical of the genocide and targeting of the ethnic minorities or religious minorities that were lynched by HTS, and they were filmed as they were being tortured and lynched and eventually killed. And so there is a lot of the Sunni critical population that is also being targeted. There was a lot of also, we heard stories from these refugees, some of these families, Sunni families in the coast that hid their neighbors that are Christian and or Alawi or Shia, and they were also targeted, and members of their families killed and their homes burnt for daring to hide innocent civilians that are running away from this genocide.
And as this is taking place, this is effectively being whitewashed. I haven't seen this in Western media. It's been people who I follow who've been pointing this out, saying this is taking place, and nobody. It's like it's just being completely whitewashed. Jolani comes out, says he's going to have an independent organization in order to investigate why there was an uprising as the killings continue to take place. That's astonishing to me. Is this being
Yes.
reported in any other, like, have you seen this reported in media outlets? Like, I'm astonished that this is, in fact, maybe I shouldn't be astonished, but this is being whitewashed. This is not being reported. This is something that is undercover and is only being reported by certain sources on the ground.
Yes, yes. I mean, the mainstream media that was covering Palestine and the genocide in Gaza correctly, mainly Al Jazeera, when we're talking about and its offshoots like Middle East Eye and so on, these
Mhm.
are also simultaneously pro HTS and pro Wahhabi death squads. So, where they could have done coverage that is unique and critical of Western outlets, actually, they are not doing so because, Al Jazeera and all the offshoots of Al Jazeera are the official foreign policy of Qatar, and Qatar is a vassal of the United States. And Qatar was allowed over the last 3 decades to have Al Jazeera uh, cover Palestine in a critical way or a pro-Palestinian way, in order on the Al Jazeera Arabic to be able to capture the Arabic audience, the 600 million Arabs around the world, and be able to manipulate them on other files that are important, and Palestine wouldn't be liberated without them, which is, let's say, how Al Jazeera manipulated the Arab population to support the Arab Autumn and the destruction of all the republics that escaped colonialism, Libya, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and so forth. And, and now, as we see, to continue to manipulate the Arabic population towards sectarianism against the minorities in Syria and so on. And on the English side, it's very similar. Al Jazeera is allowed to be critical on the file of Palestine, but if you watch any of their coverage of any other issue on the planet, not only Arab issues, they coincide with the imperialist agenda, whether it's on Ukraine, on Venezuela, or South Africa, what have you. So it's you know, unfortunately, currently there is no major mainstream outlet that cannot be that is not associated with a state and or financial power centers of the imperialist coalition.
So, what's the objective to effectively, if we can kill everybody who's in the coastal regions, we can replace them with either Turks or other people that we like. We can destroy the ability for the coastal regions to uprise, for one. We can replace the local population with people who we want, who are in and part of our religion. So all of the minority communities, Sunnis, Alawites, all of these people can be gone, just gotten rid of, Christians, etc. Is that the plan? I mean, where they're systemically trying to reshape the material balance of people in various regions in order to prevent any future uprisings and to consolidate power in the country.
Yeah, I mean, look, they have two objectives, and those two objectives, which either of them they want, and both of them end with the same thing. One is either to force the minorities in Syria that are in certain geographic regions like the coast and or Sueda in the south to secede from Syria and beg for imperialist protection, foreign protection, and or to ethnically cleanse them. And in the end, both of those result in the same thing, which is the destruction of the uniqueness of Syria and the demographic change in what is the country. Of course, you did hint to the um, colonization by Turkic, Mongolic peoples in the coast right now that's happening. And for those who don't understand this, historically, obviously, at the end, just before the beginning of World War One, when the Ottomans were fearing an Arab revolt, they began trying to build all these uh, Turkish colonies in both Syria and Iraq that will extend from the Taurus Mountains, the traditional Turkish lands, go down all the way to Jerusalem or down all the way to Baghdad. And at the time, they managed to build a few of these colonies and populate them with Turkic peoples, but not many Turks wanted to move to them. And also World War I broke out, and that stopped this colonization process. The Turks wanted to kind of find a way to guarantee their control of these parts of Syria and Iraq. And today we see a reemergence of that. And now we know from Tajik and Turkmen and Uzbek states government numbers that in the last few weeks, there's been at least 30, 40,000 families from these Central Asian countries that have been moved by the Turkish authorities into the coastal area and the north parts of Syria to try to do a demographic change. And this coincides, of course, with the Israelis in the first few weeks after the collapse of the Assad government, deliberately targeting all the civil registry offices across the country and the Foreign Affairs Ministry, meaning they burnt all the record of who is and who isn't a Syrian. And now, myself as a Syrian, if I'm not holding on to my family book, as they call it, and my passport and my ID cards and my kids' ID cards and so on, at any moment I could be told that I'm not Syrian, right? And all these Central Asian, Turkic, Mongolic peoples are being naturalized in Syria and becoming citizens, including Jolani himself, who is a Saudi.
Wow, that is.
But I want to say one last thing here before we move on to Yemen. I'm sorry, I'm going to throw one more historical fact here. The Crusaders tried this to depopulate and change the population of the coast of Syria. If we look at right now, the borders of Lebanon and what is Palestine and the coastal area of Syria, they coincide with the Crusader principalities, right? And, Syria lived this as a region, Greater Syria, the Fertile Crescent, lived this 1,000 years ago, the combined attack of the Mongolic hordes with the Crusader hordes. And the Mongols, in Iraq did what ISIS did. And the Crusaders in the coast of Syria did what the Zionists are doing right now. In fact, there's a record by the Crusader priests. They wrote what happened. When they entered the Crusaders, Ma'arrat al-Nu'man in Idlib, the town of Ma'arrat al-Nu'man, who surrendered without a fight to the Crusaders. The Crusaders conducted 3 days of cannibalism, ate them, everybody in Ma'arrat al-Nu'man. And, when they entered Jerusalem, slaughtered everybody, including the Christian churches. And so this is not new to us in the region. And the new Mongolic hordes, ISIS and so forth, and the new Crusaders or Jusaders, if you want to call them, they cannot, the truth of the matter is they cannot achieve what wasn't achieved 1,000 years ago. Today, they can't do what they couldn't. So the course of history, I know I'm saying all of this to leave some hope for people so people don't get too depressed and or feel helpless in this situation. 1,000 years ago, the Crusaders couldn't change the reality on the ground here. They lasted 100 years and they had to leave. 1,000 years ago, the Mongol hordes that came and slaughtered and destroyed whole cities of Baghdad and Aleppo and so on, razed them to the ground. They ended up also leaving, and the story is repeating itself today.
Wow. Laith, I want to move over to the Houthis and the attack on Yemen that Donald Trump is effectively presiding over. Peace president, as he's often called. What is going on the ground? My understanding is there were multiple ships that were engaged in attacks. I couldn't tell whether or not the Houthis responded and attacked the U.S. ship There were reports going both ways saying they did. There were other reports saying they were planning to. Give us some context of what's happening on the ground.
Yes, yes. So this is another lesson in history. Yemen, thousands of years, was never occupied by a foreign power, and I'm talking about specifically the mountains of Yemen.
Mhm.
Some of the coastal cities were occupied by the British and or the Romans and so forth. So the United States is again trying to achieve something here that hasn't been achieved by any power in history, which is a fool's errand, obviously. And so, Trump right now attacking Yemen on behalf of the Zionists because Yemen reactivated its, naval siege on shipping to the Zionist colony through the Red
Right.
Sea. What is Trump going to achieve more with these bombings more than Biden attempted to achieve? Can he achieve anything more? No. Can aerial bombardments change the reality on the ground in Yemen? No. So this is obviously stupid of Trump to do, and Ansarullah and the Yemeni military also already announced that they responded by attacking the Eisenhower aircraft carrier. I think it's the Eisenhower or one of the other ones. I forget now the name of it. Point is, they used a wave of drones and ballistic missiles and guided missiles to attack the aircraft carrier group, not only the main aircraft carrier, but the destroyers around it. And a thing that we should note here is obviously these aircraft carrier groups stayed very far in the north of the Red Sea,
They're
being
very
scared.
vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't want to get closer to Yemen, make
Yeah.
it even more vulnerable. And they needed, because of that, they needed resupply for their aircraft when they're coming back to land on the aircraft carrier. And the Saudis, the Qataris, and the Emiratis supposedly flew their air jet fueling tankers to help these American and British jets refuel on their way back, which is now going to open the door for Yemen to target the Saudi, Emirati, and Qatari vessels. And I think one main problem for Arab liberation over the last 100 years is that all the battles for Arab liberation against colonialism and imperialism have been fought on the lands of the Arab republics that escaped colonialism, while the vassals in the Gulf that never saw any revolutionary movement succeeding after World War II, they continued, their oil, their gas continued to be extracted on the behalf of the British and the Americans, and actually paying for the subjugation of the rest of the Arabic people. And so in right now, in today's terms, if Yemen, if the axis of resistance wants to succeed, they have to target Saudi, Qatari, Emirati, Bahraini oil and gas facilities, okay, to make these vassals pay for subsidizing the imperialist war machine in our region, and to cut off the oil and gas supply and the money flow from these countries to the West. The Arabic oil and gas didn't serve one day over the last 80 years, didn't serve one Arab, and it shouldn't exist if it's not going to serve Arabs.
See, that's the rub, Laith. I get the sense that what they are trying to do is very specific. We want to stop the war. And so the entire point of this operation of we're targeting ships was to put pressure to stop the war. And to their credit, they put more pressure than any other government has put on anybody else in order to stop the war. I mean, much of the shipping in the Red Sea either ceased or was crippled because of what they were doing. And so I don't have the sense that it's a random going after everybody thing. I had the sense that we are trying to put pressure on all of these people to stop the conflict. And what's wild about it, there were reports that Donald Trump was working behind the scenes in order to reach out to Hamas, that backchannel communications. Israel outed it. And the reporting was that Israel hated the fact that the US was trying to reach out and have direct conversations with Hamas because they didn't know if the US would come up with a deal that Israel didn't necessarily want or Israel didn't necessarily like that they may be pushed into. When these were outed, apparently the guy that was trying to reach out was fired. Meaning Trump may have been serious about wanting to keep a ceasefire. At the same token, Donald Trump is also in the pocket of Israel and will blow one away if Netanyahu blows it away. But it seems like they were trying to do something to come up with a deal. My point in saying this is that you stop the Houthis by getting a deal. You stop the Houthis by getting a deal. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong on this. That was my take on it, that the moment that you got a ceasefire, the firing in the middle Red Sea stops. Or do you have a different take on this?
No, you're right. I mean, the Ansarullah are not bloodthirsty or war hungry,
right?
Warmongers. And same thing, people in Lebanon, the resistance here, or Iran. And this is what we saw over the last 16 months. It was the response of the axis of resistance was to target military only targets in the Zionist colony, to only target and limit the financial flow of products into Israel. There was no direct targeting of civilians, whether it's or civilian infrastructure in the Zionist colony, or American bases, or Saudi or Emirati flow of money that's and products through the route of supply from the Emirates through Saudi to Jordan to Israel. They didn't do that. Well, what I'm saying is that was a mistake, actually, because in the end, all of this restraint to win the public opinion of the Western populace, to show an alternative form of warfare that is not, butchering people for no reason,
right?
That didn't lead to the West listening to its own populations, that the vast majority of Europeans and Americans, Canadians, so on, are anti-genocide in Gaza. They're supportive of the Palestinian people. They don't want the spending of money on the Zionist colony and the military supplies and so forth. That's the vast majority of the populace. And that didn't change anything in the direction of these governments in the West. In fact, as we see right now, the official religion, the sacred, the dogma of Western capitals is Zionism. It's even more so right now, enforced as the official religion. So right now, in the next stage of this war, which is already beginning, the axis of resistance, if it wants to win this war, it has to abandon its quest to influence Western audiences, because it's irrelevant, the opinion of Western audiences. The Western populace are, for the most part, castrated. Okay, they're not going to fight for their own rights. I mean, look at the United States, as you know, Jamal. The American populace is not fighting to help give equity to its Black brothers and sisters, and or to do something for the indigenous nations, and or health care, or whatever it is. So why would the American populace revolt on behalf of Palestine? It's not going to happen. So it's done. It's done. You have to, right now, the axis of resistance has to militarily set the objectives of this war, and the number one thing to change the whole balance of situation in the region is to target the oil and gas facilities that are financing the Western economies, and to target American and Israeli air bases. That will change the whole course of the war. Anything else than that is just cosmetic.
I get the sense that what you're going to get is cosmetic. Then tell me if I'm wrong. I don't get this driving sense of conflict or of war that it sounds like you're saying. In Iran, it seems that Pezeshkian, yes, he's aligning himself with the Ayatollah, but he came out publicly saying that he wanted to make a deal with the West. And even though they're saying, yes, the flow of weapons are going to continue to the Houthis, or the flow of information, whatever that network is. I don't get the sense that Iran is chomping at the bit for a larger war. I get the sense that Hezbollah has been or damaged, meaning I don't get the sense that these groups are pushing for a larger conflict or a way to expand the war. But correct me if I'm wrong. Do you see it? I mean, like I said, the Houthis thing is very limited. They're very specific. No, they're not getting credit for that in the West, to your point. Meaning that's not working. The optics of it is never going to go in their favor in the West and the way that it's looked at. I mean, hell, Caleb Maupin did a video on this and his channel got demonetized just completely for the way he talked about it. Do you see that fervor for, let's say, heightened aggression or to expand the conflict in a way that you would be seeing it? I don't see that.
Yeah, look, I mean, the imperialists and the Zionists are blood hungry, are more emboldened, and they will bring this war on Yemen and on Iran, whether they like it or not. So whether Bazakhshan wants to have a negotiation with the US or not, the US is going to bomb Iran on behalf of Israel, whether he does that or not.
Yeah.
Yemen will be attacked, and Abdul Malik al-Houthi is on the top target list, and they will try to assassinate him like they assassinated Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and Ismail Haniya and al-Sinwar. So the Yemenis and the Iranians can wish as much as they want, but the Americans and the Israelis are going to take this the direction they want to take it. And therefore, a logical thing for the Iranians and the Yemenis to do is to preempt these things, not to wait till you're bombed and assassinated before you respond and then have to calculate. No, you have to right now. The only win that we saw, full win, was October 7th, 2023. Why? Because Hamas took the initiative and triggered military confrontation on its own terms, at its own time, at its own choosing, and took over 12 Israeli military bases, captured or killed 12 Israeli generals, and liberated lands that haven't been liberated since 1948. Yes, it was momentary. But you see what taking an initiative means? It means that you're not just sitting down and taking blows and then doing replies when your enemy is ready for your replies.
Yeah, they received no help. They received no help. Laith, the last thing before I let you go, Mahmoud Khal. This conversation has fascinated me. And I need you to clarify for me. It puts me in mind of the conversation that takes place with Al Jazeera, where Al Jazeera gets credit for, okay, they're big on the issue of Gaza and Palestine. By the same token, when you look at the issue of Syria, oh my God, Jolani is a liberator. These are just Syrians, taking back in a civil war and getting rid of Assad. This is a great day, which for people like me is a bit jarring. It's like, wait a minute, how are you so heavy on the issue of Palestine? And then when you get to the issue of Syria, you don't stay consistent. Ideally, you stay consistent with this notion of, okay, well, you don't necessarily want these lands taken over by colonialists. Israel is a colonial state. You're pushing back against the colonial state in Gaza. When you get to Syria, everything is off the table. Jolani is great. Uyghurs and all of these other people, Uzbeks that are coming in, taking over, killing the minority population. They are liberators. And it felt like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a similar thing was happening with Mahmoud Khal, where in the US, people would say, oh my God, you're evicting this person because he takes a Palestinian viewpoint. But then, as you pointed out, there are other parts of his story that are weirder, that don't align with this idea of fighting back against colonial states. Go into this for me. I was fascinated by the article you sent from Free Palestine TV on this one. Explain it to us.
Yes, so Al Jazeera. Before I jump into Mahmoud Khal, Al Jazeera is allowed to do this on Palestine and support the Palestinian liberation because it's against everybody else who supports the liberation of Palestine. So Palestine and the Palestinians are besieged, and they can't liberate themselves or without external support. So you can preach as much as you want support for the Palestinians, as long as you, of course, work against everybody else who's trying to liberate them, like Syrian state at the time, or the resistance in Hezbollah and Ansarullah in Yemen and so on. So that is what is the imperialists in Washington allow Al Jazeera to do, knowing that it doesn't matter as much as it preaches for Palestine if it hates on everybody who really actively supports Palestine.
By the
Now,
way, I want to nail that down because that is a fascinating point. It's like, yeah, you can push for Palestine, but every other group that is pushing for Palestinian liberation, they're against. That's your point.
yes,
Great point.
yes, and therefore it doesn't really matter their support for Palestine. It's not going to lead to the liberation of Palestine. All this media production, so this is what they're allowed by the masters in the White House, and they play the same role in their English network. Also, they undermine anybody like Russia or China or Venezuela or what have you, right? So, and especially since the collapse of BBC's credibility and CNN's credibility and so on, Al Jazeera English right now is really the main English television network that is imperialist and conducting a successful programs for the imperialist camp because of its support for Palestine. Okay, that keeps people going to watch it. Now, Mahmoud Khalil was working for the United Kingdom Embassy in Beirut, Lebanon, and in charge of all of its Syria programs because the closure of the UK Embassy in Damascus after the beginnings of the war on Syria. And therefore, he was in charge of all the regime change operations. He had the highest security clearance on what was happening in Syria, and he was coordinating all the activities of the UK inside Syria. And he also, once he moved to the United States, was hired immediately by the biggest NGOs that are funded by all the usual suspects, and these NGOs that were all made up after the quote unquote Arab Spring, which I like to call the Arab Autumn, to fragment the Arabic and Muslim community in the United States that were all before the Arab Autumn were rallying behind Palestine during the second Intifada, and were fragmented or to deal with their own slaughter that's happening in their lands because of the Arab Autumn, whether it's Libya, Egypt, Tunis, Syria, blah, 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 and to split them up on sectarian lines because of the Syria file. And so he was hired by all these NGOs in the United States to create all these programs directed at the Arab and Muslim youth in the US to divert them away from true revolutionary anti-imperialist to this stupid Wahhabi, Ikhwani, made up revolutions of the Arab Autumn. And finally, he was working, doing his graduate studies in Columbia University, and was handpicked by the administration to be their negotiator, to be the messenger between the students and the administration. So he wasn't part of the organizing of the encampments, and he had public statements, criticizing the Hindhole occupation, and therefore he was the accepted kitchen slave, house slave, and what we saw is that it's the government of the United States and the Zionists, who this man provided a lot of service for, conducted this public lynching of him, and clearly it has the effect of frightening the field slaves, right? If master lynches the house slave, of course, all the field slaves are going to be scared. This is the point of what they did to him, and shows you how the limitation of collaborating with the Zionists or the white supremacists in general in hopes that they give you some form of equity or accept you as something else. In the end, as a collaborator, when your usefulness ends, most of the time, the imperialists will use you as throw you out as a used condom, or even set you on flames and rape you on television, like Muammar Gaddafi happened to Muammar Gaddafi when he handed over his weapons.
He was sodomized with a machete. And Hillary Clinton, I never forget it. She was sitting there. She said, "We came, we saw, he died." Like for her, this was a successful operation. And for everybody else, it's like, well, wait a minute, you've destroyed a country, not just destroyed a country. The country was rich many times over. Like,
one last thing I will say about Mahmoud Khalil before we sign off here, and this is a big question that I don't have an answer for. If this man was an agent of MI6 and running their program to destabilize Syria here in the embassy in Beirut, what does it mean that Trump nabs an MI6 agent? Is there an actual, right now, war between the UK government and the United States? And remember, this is how world powers work with each other. On the same day as the nabbing of Mahmoud Khalil, there was the tanker carrying the jet fuel that got crashed on the shores of the UK and led to a shortage of jet fuel for all the American air bases in Europe. Okay, this is how world powers work without declaring things. Is this the UK's response to its colony, Canada, being threatened to be swallowed up by Trump? Did Trump do this to harm the ability of the UK to have any influence inside the United States? These are all big questions that I don't have answers for.
Interesting.
But this is how it works. And I think there's one last thing that we should say, and you will understand this as a Black American. It could be that this guy, of course, I support all his rights, Mahmoud Khalil, and the US shouldn't be having.
This is outrageous that they're trying to deport him. He's legal here.
Yes, and doing this to him means that real radicals in the US could be treated even worse, right? If this is how they treat an MI6 agent that has a green card, that's married to an American, that has a child on the way that's going to be a naturalized American, how are they going to treat the real radicals? But you as another thing that we should point out here, and you would understand this, as I said, as a Black American, is that they killed Malcolm X, they killed Martin Luther King, but they jailed briefly Jesse Jackson, and Jesse Jackson got credibility from that. And then, of course, Jesse Jackson is a collaborator with the American institutions of colonialism and white supremacy. And so Mahmoud Khalil could be jailed briefly, and then he wins in court, and then he's out, and suddenly he has credibility to become the face of Arab and American, Muslim American.
You're thinking they're doing this?
Yes, it could be that.
No, please finish. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it could be that they are creating a controlled opposition.
It could be that. The Trump administration has been very aggressive on this issue of Israel, and they have been very vocal about using all of the powers in the White House to go after anybody that is critical of Israel and to deport those people if they have the ability to deport them. Rubio is using this ridiculous argument that he came in on a travel visa. Okay, well, dude, he's married to American, had a baby by an American citizen. He is naturalized as a green card citizen. The notion that you are evicting him using this nonsense of a travel visa is outrageous. So whatever he is, the premise that they're using is insane. I guess my thing is the Trump administration, even before they got in, has been very clear. We are going to deport anybody that has criticism of Israel if we have the ability to do so, and we're going to crack down on campuses. So you could be totally right, where they're using this to bolster his credibility for whatever he's doing. in pursuit of the people who have paid him and the affiliations he's had. But it could also just be a hammer is a hammer. And Trump is looking at fulfilling his campaign promises. He's got $100 million from Israel, and any criticism is too much criticism. It could be either of those things. And by the way, it could work out exactly in the way that you're talking about, even if Trump is just, he said something, I want to get rid of him. It could be either.
Yes. There's, this is, look, all I'm trying to do here is to help people be a little bit more critical than just consuming the stories as they are. Because this story of Mahmoud Khalil has taken so much space right now in the Western alternative media that we're even not looking at. There's now tens of other students and professors in the US that are living the same reality that Mahmoud Khalil has lived.
Yes.
And even including some German white guy that is married to an American and has a green card and got deported in the airport. It's getting too ridiculous. But because the Mahmoud Khalil story is taking too much space, we're not able to analyze these things in a wider systemic way. And that's all I'm trying to do with asking these questions.
I totally appreciate it. That's why I love having you here. You dig into the stuff in a way that gets more complexity to it. I'll say it that way. Laith, man, I always appreciate you joining me. The audience loves you. We had a good crowd today. Laith Marouf, he is an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonialization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples and building broadcasting capabilities for misrepresented and underrepresented communities around the world. Laith, where can people find you so they can find your content and work?
Yes, you can go to our website, freepalestine.video, and from there follow all our social media. We're on YouTube, X, Insta, and tons of more other platforms. Please donate and join our social media. Follow us on all those platforms.
Laith, always appreciate you, man. Be safe. Have a good one, okay?
Good to be with you, Jamal. See you soon.
Thank you.